Hello and welcome to this edition of Let's Talk Law. I'm Anusha Soni. Today I'd rather delve into a provocative question. Is the Constitution of India secular? Well, the answer is an obvious yes. Secularism is one of the core constitutional values. But what is the meaning of word secularism? Does it mean a complete separation of the state and religion? And if that's the classic definition that we may accept, then can any state-run institution have any kind of cultural, local customs of symbols that may be religious in nature or may have their religious overtones? In a country like India, does secularism mean an iron wall between the state and religion? Is that possible? And if you say yes, then why is it that the Supreme Court of India derives its motto from none other than Mahabharat? Now, moving on and talking about the word secularism, it was indeed inserted into the preamble of the Indian Constitution by the 42nd Amendment back in 1976. But the Supreme Court has held that secularism has always been an innate part of India's Constitution and its values. Its addition to the preamble is just a reassertion. Well, what are the roots of secularism in India? The present-day modern Indian law heavily derives its existence from the English law. But various facets of the British system are not really quote-unquote secular in real sense of the word. Even today, the king or the queen of the England must mandatorily be a Protestant Christian, as they are the defender of the faith and the supreme governor of the Church of England, according to the conventions in England. Unlike India, where there is no monarchy and constitutional position, including that of the president or the prime minister, can be occupied by a person belonging to any caste, creed, belonging to any faith. Now, many legal historians argue that the concept of secularism in India is ridden with colonial overtones, even today. A strict separation of religion and the state, creation of a hypersensitive discourse around the minorities to feed into their insecurities, and more importantly, the creation of personal laws, while England did not have any special laws for its minorities, instead had a uniform civil code. While the colonizers had this concept of a complete separation or some kind of iron curtain to secure their own interests and rule in India. The British concept of secularism, though, has been defined and redefined many times and underwent a major change as India got its constitution, but the shadows continue to survive even today. Today, I shall argue that India's constitution took a different turn over the last 70 years and has evolved its own unique definition of secularism, a kind that is not shy of its cultural roots and character. The founding fathers of the Indian Constitution rejected the colonial notions imposed on them by the British around the word secularism. Let's begin with one example. Cow slaughter is banned in most states across India. It's a serious criminal offense punishable up to life imprisonment in some states. But that was not the scenario before we got independence. So, for example, cow slaughter was allowed in British India. On Bakri Eid, the Muslims were permitted to slaughter cows, provided it was in a walled enclosure out of the sight of the Hindus whose sentiment could be heard. Jinnah opposed the ban on cow slaughter. Gandhi was an avowed cow protectionist but believed in convincing Muslims to give up the practice on their own accord instead of enforcement through a ban. And after an extensive debate within the Constituent Assembly, the provision to ban cow slaughter was made a directive principle of state policy, inserted into the Constitution as Article 48. Now, post-1947 and throughout the Constituent Assembly debates, key issues including cow slaughter, religious conversions, uniform civil code, evoked strong arguments in favor of celebrating, accepting and evolving our own brand of secularism, which is not ridden with a colonial hangover. If you ever get a hand on the original copy of the Indian Constitution, it has depictions from Mahabharat, Ramayana, pictures of Tipu Sultan and many other historical figures. The bare, cold, icy, pale and colorless definition of secularism is not India's heritage. Not just culturally, but legally and constitutionally, India has been the pot boiler with an amalgamation of various cultures, identities and religion, each affecting our laws and the Indian Constitution. India and its brand of secularism is not against the display of religious symbols in public or forbidding expression of religious identity in public, like in France. Coming to yet another crucial aspect. Many questions are often raised as to what extent should elected leaders display their religion or their own religious identity. Now, that's an interesting aspect to talk about. Can the Prime Minister of the country take part in a religious ceremony or event? What does the law say? Expression of individual faith and religion while holding a constitutional office is not barred under Indian Constitution. Let's go back into the history a bit. Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the first president of India, attended the inauguration ceremony at the Somnath temple, despite the Prime Minister that time, Pandit Nehru, frowning upon his attendance at the temple. Dr. Prasad nevertheless went ahead and attended the ceremony. The High Court of Gujarat, as recently as 2011, held that Bhumi Pujan for the court's foundation laying ceremony, at which religious ceremony was being conducted, or there were shlokas or mantras that were being recited. It did not conflict with India's brand of secularism. India's constitution protects the distinct identity and culture of the minority communities, tribals, indigenous population. The sixth schedule of the Indian constitution recognizes special land rights and personal laws for the tribal communities in India. But diversity, as they say, is a double-edged sword. Various regressive discriminatory practices continue enjoying protection under the ambit of the personal laws. The intricate balance that India wished to strike through a common civil code is still not a reality after 75 years of independence. But to perceive India's strong cultural identity and expression as an antithesis to its commitment to secularism is indeed a misleading proposition. Thanks for watching.